A lone figure enters a silent cottage where a body lies. He takes a piece of bread from the dead man's chest and eats it, speaking words that claim the deceased's sins for his own. This was the reality for the sin eater, a mysterious and forgotten figure from our past. By the end of this journey, you will understand the true weight of a profession that traded a few coins for a soul's eternal burden. We will uncover the origins of this strange ritual and explore why an entire community would rely on one outcast to cleanse their dead. What kind of person would willingly take on the guilt of others? This ritual was not born in a vacuum, but sprouted from the damp, rural soils of the British Isles. For centuries, from the 1600s through the 1800s, the practice was most common in the remote villages of Wales, the borderlands known as the English Marches, and the Scottish Highlands. Here, the sin eater was a recognized, if shunned, figure. He was almost always a man from the absolute lowest rung of society, an outcast so poor he had nothing left to lose, not even his own soul. Grieving families would pay him a few coins to perform his solemn duty. He would enter the home where the body was laid out, approach the deceased, and see a piece of bread, or sometimes a small cake and a cup of ale, resting on the chest of the corpse. In a low voice, he would recite a short prayer or statement, then consume the food and drink. With every bite and every sip, the community believed he was not just eating bread, but devouring the lifetime of moral failings that belonged to the person who had died. He was taking their lies, their angers, their petty cruelties into his own being, cleansing the soul so it could travel unburdened into the afterlife. Where did such a powerful, unsettling idea come from? Many scholars point to ancient, pre-Christian beliefs. It echoes older pagan traditions where offerings were made to spirits or gods of the underworld, a symbolic exchange to ensure safe passage. This created a profound tension with the established church. Christian doctrine was clear: only God, through His grace, could forgive sins. The sin eater was a rogue operator in the economy of salvation, a human stepping into a divine role. For common folk, however, this was not about theology. It was about a desperate, practical need for peace, a peace that the official channels sometimes failed to provide. The ceremony itself was a quiet, almost secretive affair designed for function over spectacle. When a person drew their last breath, a messenger would be sent not to the priest, but to the lonely dwelling of the sin eater. Under the cover of dusk or dawn, this outcast would arrive, never using the front door. He would slip inside through the back, a silent acknowledgement that he carried a spiritual contamination. Inside the hushed room, the air thick with grief and candle smoke, the body of the deceased would be laid out. Resting directly upon their chest, or sometimes on the wooden lid of the coffin, was the heart of the ritual. A plain piece of bread, a small loaf, or a salt cake sat beside a cup of ale or wine. These were not offerings to the dead, but vessels for his transgressions. The sin eater would approach, his shadow flickering on the walls. He would take the bread into his hands and begin to eat. Then he would lift the cup and drink. With each deliberate mouthful, the community believed he was consuming the dead person's moral failings. The bread soaked up every lie, the ale washed down every act of envy or spite. As he ate, he would murmur the words that sealed the bargain. One traditional phrase whispered in the borderlands was, "I give easement and rest now to thee, dear man. Come not down the lanes or in our meadows, and for thy peace I pawn my own soul. Amen." This was not a prayer for divine mercy, it was a direct and chilling transaction. The words pleaded for the spirit to rest and not wander as a ghost, while the final clause, "I pawn my own soul," was the ultimate price. He was taking a lifetime of accumulated guilt and placing it upon his own spiritual ledger, giving the deceased a clean slate for the afterlife in exchange for a few coins and his own damnation. He was the man you crossed the street to avoid, a figure of permanent shadow in a world of light. The sin eater was not a role one chose, but a fate one inherited through sheer desperation. These men were drawn from the absolute margins of society, the destitute, the homeless, or those bearing physical deformities that marked them as different. A community needed someone who had nothing left to lose, not even a place among the living, to bargain for the dead. They performed a vital spiritual service, yet they were treated as permanently contaminated. The very sins they consumed were believed to cling to them, creating an aura of palpable uncleanness that kept all others at a distance. Imagine the profound loneliness of such an existence. He lived in a hovel on the outskirts of the village, spoken of only in whispers. Children were warned not to look at him. Neighbors would not meet his gaze in the lane. He was a pariah, utterly essential in the moment of a family's deepest grief, and utterly shunned once the ritual was complete. He was paid his few coins and then hurried away, the door shut firmly behind him, returning to a life of profound isolation. This was the cruel paradox of his profession, revered for the peace he provided and reviled for the spiritual filth he carried. The psychological weight must have been crushing. Every piece of bread eaten was a reminder of his own damnation, a tangible accumulation of other people's guilt that he wore like a second skin. How does a man live with the belief that his own soul is forfeit, pawned piece by piece for mere survival? While most sin-eaters fade into the anonymous mist of history, a few names and accounts survive, offering us a fleeting glimpse of the person behind the ritual. One of the most famous accounts comes from South Wales, recorded by a folklorist in the late 19th century. He described a specific sin-eater, a man known to everyone in the district, who was called to his duty with a strange sense of ceremony and dread. This man lived completely alone, and it was said that the sheer weight of the sins he had absorbed over the years had left him spiritually heavy, a walking collection of every transgression from the surrounding valleys. To look upon him was to see a living embodiment of the community's hidden shame. The idea of transferring sin to another was not unique to those Welsh valleys. Across the ancient world, we find similar rituals built on the same profound human need. In the old Jewish tradition described in the Bible, on the Day of Atonement, a high priest would lay his hands upon a goat, confessing the sins of the entire people of Israel. This animal, the original scapegoat, was then driven into the wilderness, carrying all those transgressions away from the community. It was a powerful, symbolic act of purification. In other parts of Europe, from Germany to the Balkans, folk customs sometimes involved passing a loaf of bread over a corpse to absorb its wrongdoings before giving it to a beggar or an animal. These practices all point to a universal human impulse, the desire to be clean, to physically expel moral failings by placing them onto something or someone else. The sin eater was simply the most personalized, the most human form of this ancient longing. He was not a goat to be banished, but a man who had to live among them, a walking, breathing reminder of the guilt they had paid him to carry. This archetype of the burdened outcast has proven irresistible to modern storytellers. In John Connolly's novel, The Book of Lost Things, a sin eater appears as a terrifying figure who literally consumes the memories and regrets of the dying, growing more monstrous with each meal. The long-running television series, Supernatural, featured an entire episode where the heroes confront a modern sin eater, a man continuing the old tradition to help spirits move on. These fictional depictions tap directly into the core themes that made the historical figure so compelling: sacrifice, guilt, and the heavy cost of redemption. Why does this image of a solitary figure consuming sin still haunt us? Perhaps because we all understand, on some level, the weight of our own failings. The sin eater represents a desperate fantasy, the hope that our moral debts could be settled with a simple transaction, that our peace could be purchased by another's sacrifice. He is the ultimate vessel for our collective fears, a human shield against the terrifying uncertainty of what comes after death. He asks the question we are all afraid to answer: what would you give to be clean? So we are left with the echo of a forgotten ritual, a man eating bread in a silent room to cleanse the dead. We have walked through the shadow of his world, from the specific details of the ceremony where food and drink became vessels for a lifetime of sin, to the profound social exile he endured. He was a spiritual cleanser, essential for a community's peace, yet treated as permanently contaminated, a walking repository for the guilt no one else would carry. His story did not end in those quiet villages, but has lived on, reshaped in our books and screens, a testament to his enduring cultural legacy. This figure forces us to confront a deep and unsettling question about our own nature. Why are we, as humans, so fascinated by the idea of transferring our guilt, of finding someone or something to bear our burdens for us? The Sin Eater is a mirror reflecting our timeless yearning for redemption and our deep-seated fear of facing the consequences of our own actions alone. And that leads to one final, pressing thought for our modern age. If we no longer appoint a lone outcast with bread and ale, who or what have we chosen to be our sin eaters today? What institutions, what technologies, or what public figures do we silently ask to carry the weight of our collective wrongs, to consume our transgressions so we might feel clean? I would truly love to hear your thoughts on this. Please share your answers in the comments below. And if these journeys into history's forgotten corners have captivated you, subscribe for more mysteries from the past. Let me know what other strange and lost traditions should we explore together next.